All right, so welcome back. Thank you for joining Transformation again. This is our 10th episode since we have started this great show here. And we, like I always say, I want to thank the Berks Rise Center for allowing us the space to shoot our podcast. Also, Joshua Camacho for his time. He's our co-host here for Transformations Facebook Live podcast. I want to take the time out also and greet all the our viewing guests that continuously support our podcast and send us messages throughout the week worldwide, which is pretty cool. So yeah, with all that said, I'll have Josh say a few things and then we'll introduce our guest today.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you guys so much for tuning in every week, like you guys have been doing. The support has been unbelievable, and to think already that this is episode 10. We've been doing it for 2.5 months now, and the amount of support continues to grow week by week. The amount of people that we reach continues to get even larger week by week, and that's all due to the unbelievable support of you guys sharing the podcast and just tuning in, and we just really truly appreciate it. Continue to leave us comments, continue to leave us suggestions on topics on who to talk to, and Lee has a pretty unbelievable lineup of guests coming up all the way up into the early spring, so no plans on stopping anytime soon. We just want to thank you guys, and we just kind of, it's a little bit of a celebratory day, you know, to be episode 10. It's kind of like a milestone, you know what I mean? And we have many more to come. So we just wanted to say thank you guys so much. And we have an amazing guest this week, and you guys should really, 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 really turn up the volume.
All right, so this week we have invited Miss Joy Honer to come down and speak and share some of her experience, strength, and hope to our viewers. Joy is a good friend of mine. She's a great supporter of Transformation. She's a great support system in the community, and she'll give you a little bit more about her background. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm grateful to be here. You know, I think and again, this depends on the person, but for me, it's important to recover out loud. And what that means for me is to be somebody who's transparent and open about my recovery so that people know that we're out there. You know, for a long time, there was kind of some misunderstandings about what the word anonymity meant. And what that means is I can't tell you I represent any 12-step programs. I don't. I'm not a spokesperson for any of them. I'm not a spokesperson today for the place I work for. I'm here to just share my own experience, strength, and hope, and my own, the things I've learned on this path of recovery. When I say I'm a person in long-term recovery, that means for me that I haven't had a drug or a drink for about 41 and a half years, which is crazy, right?
Amen.
Which is crazy. And when I say it out loud, I'm like, who did that? You know, and honestly, there's a whole bunch of people that did that. You know, they're not just me. It's not all about me. Not today, anyway. Sometimes, but not today. So when Lee asked me, first of all, kudos to Lee. He does so much in the community. He gives so much to people. He is passionate about sharing the message of recovery to everybody, and I really, really think, quite frankly, he you know, if we could give him a virtual round of applause, I would do it. Woo!
Thank you.
And I don't know Josh yet, but I hear good things about him, so I give him, you know, for sure. And he showed up today, which is always
That's right.
Just teasing him. So I'll start with a little bit about my story, and I encourage you to ask questions. I got into recovery when I was 17 years old. And I actually went to my first 12-step meeting as a joke because my friend's probation officer told her she had to go to like 3 meetings a week because her crime was drinking underage. And so she was like, Joy, do you want to go with me? And I was like, that's going to be fun. Yeah, let's go, whatever, you know. Now, to tell you the truth, and I don't share a lot about my substance use, mostly because we all know that story. You know, we all know what we've experienced. I can tell you that at the age of 16, I was hospitalized for hepatitis. I can tell you that I was on the streets for about 6 months, somewhere between 15 and 16, my choice. I left home. I can tell you that I lost the trust of my family. I lost the trust of, I had no trust in myself. I had zero concept of who I was, other than outside of the substance. And I also was a good person. And here's what I mean by that. I wanted to do good things. I wanted to be a good person. I wanted to finish school. I was actually, when I got into recovery, going to be starting 11th grade for the second time. And the only reason I passed half of 9th and part of 10th was I was in a special school for kids who had behavior problems. And my behavior problems related, obviously, to my substance use. But I wanted to be a good person. A brief indicator of that was, at some point I was kind of playing with my substance use and going, well, I won't use this drug. Because, I'll only use this drug, or I'll only drink. I'll do this, and then maybe I'll get it under control. So, which didn't work. But I was up one night late, and I saw this television show on the Guardian Angels. Now, I don't know if you know what the Guardian Angels are, but they ride the subways to protect people from crime. In the midst of my substance use, I joined the Guardian Angels to protect people from crime. I did. And I went, because they were just starting in Philly, and you had to show up, and you got trained and everything, and honestly, for a little while, it actually kept me out of the crowds that I was in. Because you had to go like several days a week to the training things, and you had to commit your time. But there was one day when I was on my way to that, and I saw a person, place, or thing, and they were like, "Joy, we miss you, man. We got some stuff." And I was like, maybe I'll just do this one time. But so I talk about that because when you're in the midst of it, when you're in the midst of that obsession and that compulsion, and when you don't have a lot of support, because I didn't tell these people I use drugs, obviously. When you don't have a lot of support, you're more vulnerable to pick up again. And so I picked up again, and then a month later, I got hepatitis, and I was in the hospital, and I missed the graduation ceremony. And the guys came to the hospital, and I was like, yeah, I ate shellfish. That's how I got hepatitis. I don't even know if they probably didn't believe me. I think they wanted to believe me. But, so what happened was, I went to my first meeting, and I sat in that meeting, and what I heard was other people talking about my life, even at 17. And what I've learned about relating is, and about finding your community, is that I didn't have to relate to, I lost my job, I lost school. I didn't lose the trust of my kids, I lost the trust of myself and my family. So I had to learn, because no matter what station you come in your life, into recovery, you can always find somebody you can't relate to. And so I've related to disappointment in myself, being fearful of not having that next drug or drink. All those things, and I was like, this sounds like me. And so I mentioned to the people after the meeting, I said, it sounds like me. And they were like, good, what are you doing tomorrow at noon? We'll pick you up. Where do you live? We'll take you to a meeting. Like, literally, and that's the thing I've learned about all recovery communities, is if you put out there that you need help, people will step up. And sometimes that's hard, by the way, and I know it's hard to ask for help, but the people in AA and NA, and I actually went to both fellowships early on, very much adopted me for those first couple weeks. And I specifically remember, but again, I was 17, so I'm like, oh my God, my life's gonna suck. It's gonna be awful. I can't relate to these old people. You're all old. And I was like, I joined a cult. That was the other thing. But I kept going. Why? So here's the thing I also believe. Sometimes the things that we have that help us cope in life. So I'm also an adult child of an alcoholic. Sometimes the things we use in coping, how we cope in our life, help us until they don't help us anymore. And that's why, by the way, that 10th step is a 10th step. It says continue to take personal inventory. Because some things that are even not healthy work for us for a while. And what helped me stay sober in those early years was I was a really good people pleaser. So I wanted to get like an A in recovery. And so I showed up and I did the things and I felt good because people were patting me on the head. And that was good. Didn't matter if it came from a place of not wellness. It's almost like that, you know, I do believe sometimes just showing up is part of it. And so I went to meetings for a couple weeks. And there was a point where I kind of realized, because I did, believe it or not, even with somebody with hepatitis, I could minimize my use all day long. I could. I could still figure out I still wasn't as bad as this, or I didn't do that drug. I did every other drug. I didn't do the drug that begins with H because somehow I thought that made me really a drug addict. That's not true, by the way. But I was like, oh, well, I didn't do that. But I did everything else. And so I was going to a meeting actually in Kensington, in Philly, and we all know that Kensington has a lot of substance use. And I drove by a park that I slept in. And I realized that I was no different than anyone. Because you know how our disease selectively trains us to forget things like I slept in a park. I slept on a park bench. And so I got into recovery. Well, so then the last piece of this early recovery story is, again, that the universe really worked hard, which is my higher power. And I know that sounds like squishy and all that stuff, but it's the best I got, and it's been working for 41 years. I'm not religious. So the flow of the universe, I believe, I'm either in it or I'm out it. And I'm out of it when I'm sitting in my ego or my fear or my selfishness, and I'm in it when I'm in love and connection and hope. So about 2 weeks into the recovery, as I said, my mom was actually an alcoholic, and she drove me to a meeting. And on the way to the meeting, she stopped at the liquor store, and I was really pissed. I was like, what the F? So I went into the meeting and I shared it, and this guy was like, you should go to treatment. You should probably get out of there. Because I was living in the projects in Philly, because my mom's disease had taken us to that place. And you know, I also did a lot, I sold drugs in the project. So it just was not a good place for me to be. And so I was like, okay, I'll go to rehab. And so the funny thing, my father had passed away, and he was a veteran, and he was a postal worker, and so I had insurance through my father. And when I came home and said to my mom, I want to go to treatment, she was like, you're not that bad. These people are just trying to brainwash you. You're not really that bad. And I was like, which actually was literally the perfect thing she could have said to me. I was like, F you, I'm going to treatment, and you can't stop me. And actually, legally, she couldn't stop me. So I went to treatment for 2 months, and then I went to a halfway house, and my recovery began. And so a piece I want to mention here, if you're listening and you're not completely convinced that you want to be in recovery, I'm going to tell you you belong in recovery. It took me about 2 years of being in recovery to want to be in recovery. Really, I just did the work, I just stepped up, I just showed up, but my motivation was really it because I wanted people to like me. And again, I wanted an A in recovery. So for a long time, that worked for me until I realized at about a couple years sober, well, I'd say like a year sober, I was like, okay, this doesn't completely suck. And then like a year and a half sober, I was like, you know, oh, well, you know, maybe there's some advantages to it. And then by the time I got around 2 years, I was like, this is awesome. And now I'm like, I kick your butt if you try to touch my recovery. But, you know what I mean? But I didn't know it back then. So I had to, so I don't believe, and I will never tell anybody, come back when you're ready. Because if I would have waited until I was ready, I would have died. I was never ready to get recovery. I really wasn't. And maybe you had the experience where you were, and that's good too, but if I waited until I was ready, recovery was hard and uncomfortable at the beginning. It was not something I imagined, and I actually thought I'd be boring as hell, which, I don't know, personally I think I'm not boring, but that's just me. But, I was ready to give something up, but I wasn't ready to give all of it up. And when I heard sometimes people say in the meetings, you have to be 100% willing, I was like, ooh, maybe I don't deserve this seat, because today I'm about 60% willing, but I showed up. And so I think to me, it's important to let people know that your motivation can change, can move back and forth. And actually, step 2 talks about that in the 12 and 12, because it says willingness is the key that opens the door. Sometimes I slam that door shut, but that door's always able to be open. I have the key, and I can say, okay, today I'm willing to do this. But the more recovery I got, the more recovery meant to me. So it is cumulative. The other piece of it is, and I just had this conversation with somebody. So I just heard somebody recently quote, I'm quoting them. No, I'll say it a different way because it's not right. They called a small group of people that they kind of knew assholes because, not because they knew them, not because they spent any time with them all. They actually just knew one thing, is that a few of them stated that they don't go to that many meetings anymore, or they don't go to meetings anymore. And the person called them assholes. And I really was hurt about that, because at what time did we decide that we get to gatekeep anybody else's recovery? Like, who am I to judge somebody who's productive, happy, healthy, has a community? Like, I just felt really, well, actually, I felt really angry. And I felt really disappointed that based on one thing, this person had made a decision about these people's character. Now we know, so I'm going to talk about and, not or. What I've learned in recovery, and what I've learned as somebody who works in this field, is that the word should be and. See, I can go to 12-step meetings and go to Smart Recovery. I could go to Smart Recovery and therapy. I could go to church and the gym. Exactly. Why do we have to have or? It's either Smart Recovery or 12 steps. It's either medication or meetings, or no. So my shirt says, be kind. When in my lifetime, I believe that there are periods in my life where I might have harmed people being judgment about their program. Now I've had some time to evolve. 41 years is a long time. And I can tell you personally, AA and NA saved my life. And working the 12 steps is something that I still do today. But how that looks for me isn't up for discussion. Because it's working. Now if it's not working, you and I can sit down and say, what's not working here? But if it's working, if I'm happy, healthy, productive, spiritual, connected, I go to the gym. If I'm doing all those things, who are you to say that I'm on medication? Whether medication works or doesn't work for me. Or whether Dharma recovery is my solution. Or whether church is my solution. Or whether the gym is my solution. I feel like sometimes we put people in boxes and then make decisions about that. And I experienced that early in recovery too, because there was a whole kind of like, I don't care if you say sober or clean. I say recovery because I kind of feel like it covers it all. Now the good news is that so what happened was I did the inside work of recovery. Because if meetings alone, meetings are good, meetings help me get a social life, meetings help reinforce it. I did get a sponsor, I did work the steps, and then I worked the steps again, and then I worked the steps again, you know, and I still, in my head, internally, default to those steps, because if I'm inappropriate, or if I'm a shithead, excuse my language, but, you know, if I'm an asshole, I can make amends today. Yay! And I can even make them sooner than like 3 weeks later sometimes, and sometimes not, I'm just saying. You know, but I can make amends today. If I have a behavior that I keep bumping into, I can apply the 6th and 7th step. I can become entirely ready to change that aspect in my life. And then move on. I can have a spiritual life. I can get connected to nature, which is a place where I feel connected to my higher power. And so I can seek through meditation to improve my conscious contact with the universe, as I understand it. I can help other people. I can help the community. You know, to me, the 12th step is not only giving back to those who still suffer, but it's giving back to the community. And that's where, so my recovery continues to evolve. And I think that that's, for me, the important piece of this. I am not the person that I was at 10 years sober in recovery. I'm not the person that I was 20 years. I don't know what the hell I'm going to be when I'm like 50 years sober. I hope I live that long. I mean, I hope I live a long time. That's my goal. You know, that's why I go to the gym. Kind of be healthy. Still chubby, but we're working on that. But my health is a concern, you know. So I want to live a long time, but part of what recovery, so a few really powerful pieces of recovery that have been kind of what has stayed in my life is, one, I never have to be a victim. So it's really funny, but by being powerless, I actually became empowered. So I took my power back. So sometimes I get in this mode, but most of the time I am not a victim. I don't have to be a victim of something. I don't have to have something. I know that I can actively change the things that I can change. And if I can't change them, then it's not my business, number one. And number two, I need to get to that place of acceptance, which still means I get to change. And so what's been really cool about it is that there's been parts of my life that maybe have not been working out, or something that was not healthy for me at the time, or didn't work anymore. Through the process of reaching out to my support systems, sometimes going back into therapy. Therapy's a huge tool. Sometimes writing or reading a book. But I've been able to change that situation or change myself. And to me, that's recovery. Like the fact that I don't have to be a victim to something, or a relationship. Honestly, I've had situations where relationships didn't work anymore. They might have worked at the time, and things have changed, and I was able to move on. And to me, that's what those steps talk about. You know, those maintenance steps, the 10th, 11th, and 12th. It doesn't say continue to take. You know, it's like, what's the reason for me to continue to take personal inventory? Well, it's meant to be a reflection, so that if I'm in a situation, or I can change it, or if I have a belief that's no longer healthy, I can address it. I can even address my own shit on the fly. Sometimes I have really stupid thoughts. You know what I mean? I can be like, what? Come on, Joy. And actually, that is a tool that I learned in therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy was questioning my own thoughts. Imagine that. All my thoughts aren't right. Revolutionary. You know, and again, recovery says that. So what I've learned as I've growed up in recovery is the process of reflection and the ability to change. And that will continue until I die. You might see me 2 years from now, I'm on the show and you're like, she said something different last time. That might be true, right? We're all gonna learn, we all learn. Here's what I know. The other piece that helped me in my recovery significantly was, another thing happened when I was somewhere between 2 and 3 years sober. And that was, once I almost drank because I tried to go to frat parties and drink Perrier. That was a really good idea because I was, I went to college. I got a GED when I was in the halfway house. I went to college and I was working on the campus radio station, and these cool frat guys were like, "Joy, you can come to our party. We'll even buy some Perrier for you." I was like, "Oh, that's so nice." It was a bad idea, but one of the things I discovered was the steps are really a good tool to reset too. And so instead of going back to my sponsor and saying I just almost drank, I went back to my sponsor and we worked on the thing that put me in that situation, which was that people pleasing. And so I kind of did a 4-step on that kind of like ACOA stuff, and I just started getting into that. But it was like, so I do think like what a fantastic tool for me to engage in change. And I went back into therapy when I was, let me think, like 5 years. My mom passed away eventually. Mostly, it was a cumulative health issues related to her drinking and smoking. And you think to yourself, you're never going to stay sober if, and I was able to stay sober because of my community, because of therapy, because of the people that care about me, because of my connection to the universe. I knew that there was that doing anything other than staying sober wouldn't have made any sense. But when I was 5 years sober, I went into something that they used to call codependency treatment. They now call breakthrough, but it was a 1-week intensive, like kick your butt therapeutic experience. Nothing about substance use. It was all about the things that I experienced in my life as a result of alcoholism and addiction in my family, and how they impacted how I dealt with things. And to me, that really kick-started my connection to myself. It was another way to grow. And so one of the principles in my recovery has always been, and will always be, I'm open to different opportunities. I'm open to, like I said, going back into therapy, doing spiritual retreats, which actually I wound up starting for another organization later on. Where can I take the opportunity to grow? Where can I find opportunities to grow? And I'm going to say this because I will talk a little bit about harm reduction, because I'm really an advocate of multiple pathways in harm reduction at this point in my life, and I feel like for not only professional reasons but for personal reasons, I've learned that we need to just embrace people with substance use disorders with love and open arms, no matter what stage they're at. And I think about when I was 17, there were people in meetings that said, I spilled more than you drank, or I used more than you, just not a lot of them, or I only go to this fellowship, but you're confusing the message because you're going to two. Now the good news is I was family of origin stuff. My role was scapegoat. So the minute you told me something, I couldn't do something or I shouldn't do something, I'd be like, I'm going to do it and I'm going to put it in your face. And so in some ways, my life was like, I'm showing up and I'm going to show up and be sober, and if I feel like it, I do it. So poor Lee. Do I have to do a Heimlich?
No.
I'm sorry.
You're good.
But what I learned was this, that recovery created the foundation for my whole life. It really did, and it still does. The principles of recovery are sitting in me as a human being. But If the only thing that I did in my life was recovery, if that's all I ever did, I would have wanted to use. And what I mean by that is recovery is not only gives us our lives, but it gives us the opportunity to make a life. And so for me, by the time I was 21, well, let's see, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20. By the time I was 20, 21, I got with my counselor and I was like, this stuff is boring. And he was like, you're boring. And I was like, what do you mean I'm boring? He's like, well, what are you doing? I was like, well, I'm going to meetings. And he's like, yeah. What else? I don't know, going to AA dances and AA dances. He's like, yeah, what else? What I had to learn was that recovery gave me a life, but for me, and again, if the only thing you do is meetings for 50 years and you are happy and healthy and you love it, go for it. For me, what worked was finding all the other things that I love to do. Exercise, art, reading, activities, travel. I'm a big traveler. In my recovery, I've been to Norway, Japan, Scotland, Ireland, Iceland, Spain, Gibraltar, Paris, all the Caribbeans. Partially because I'm addicted to cruising on Disney Cruise Line, but that's a whole other thing. But I've been to all these countries and all these places. Recovery gave me a life, but in order to keep that life, I had to build a life that I want to live. So I had to be responsible. I had an issue with money in early recovery. I had to do a whole inventory on money. Because, credit card companies were like, here, Joy, you can just buy stuff and pay for it over 20 years. I was like, yes, I can buy stuff even if I can't afford it. So I did. And so at some point I had to hit that bottom with spending. And I had to do an inventory with spending. And I was like, So, now I have credit limits. And actually my credit score runs between 790 and 830 on a regular basis, depending on how much, because then I take vacations and I pay it off. But I pay it off quickly. What I'm saying is that recovery has given me the opportunity to open up my life. I have friends that are not in recovery. They're like people, and they deal with stuff like people. I do have to say that I'm glad that I have a therapeutic insight kind of relationship with myself, because sometimes some of them struggle, but not all. But most of them are healthy, happy, reflective human beings that didn't need to go through this whole process to figure some of that stuff out. But that doesn't mean that I'm not in recovery. It just means that my life is opened up and I have a big recovery. I don't have to be one thing or this or that. I can do many things. And I actually think there are some phases in recovery, and some people do track kind of those phases. One of the things I think, one of the best things that they've come up with over the past several years is the concepts of motivational interviewing, and acknowledging where people are and how that impacts their relation to getting well, because it honors people where they're at. And I never want to be that person that dismisses somebody's willingness to show up. And if they're not, well, that doesn't even apply anymore, because I really don't have much of an idea about what would make somebody, I just can't imagine what would make somebody not deserve an opportunity to connect to the things that we call recovery. I can't imagine that there's not a reason. I'm talking a lot, by the way. If you have any questions?
I wanted to touch on a few things that you were talking about, but I didn't want to cut you off because you're doing such a great job.
Yeah, I'm a little crazy. I get excited about this stuff.
In explaining your recovery process and how it worked for you, because it's important like the one thing that stuck out for me was people struggling, like for people that are currently struggling, this is what we do the podcast for. And like I was telling you before we went on air, that people have been reaching out to me and they were talking to me about how they struggle with 12-step programs because that's where everybody's been telling them to go. But they don't really care for them. Is there anything else? And that's why I had asked you before we went on air if you had any information for that person or persons that are struggling currently for those other Zoom meetings.
I have, so there's an organization called Unity Recovery that on their website they have something called All Recovery Meetings, and they're general recovery meetings. They're not 12-step based, but they're for anybody who's struggling and reaching out. There are also, there's Smart Recovery. So they are facilitated meetings, but they do have a website. There is Women for Sobriety, and that's a women's-based recovery program. There is Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christian-based recovery program many churches offer. And actually, some churches have different types of they're not 12-step based, but they're recovery-based. There is something called Life Ring. There's also a program called Medication Assisted Recovery Anonymous, that even though they have steps, they're very different than the 12 steps that we recognize. And one of my favorite that I kind of think pings people a little bit, well, actually there's a group called Punk Rock Sober Support that I'm a part of on Facebook, and they actually goes to shows and support people who are like punk rock, or old punk rock like me. I wouldn't call myself so punk anymore, but you know. At one point I did, in my sobriety, have a mohawk, and I had 12 earrings in this ear, one for each step, and I have lots of tattoos, because, you know. And I'm still freaky, just I'm freaky with a little more. I need to be employed, so, you know, I need to be a little more socially acceptable.
Oh, Joy, I love you.
So, but there is actually a program now, there's actually an organization called the Satanic Temple Sober Faction. Now, if you know anything about the Satanic Temple, they do not believe in Satan. They worship the ability to be free from religion. But there is an entire sober group that's virtual with a few other meetings for people who really struggle with the concept of religion. And I also didn't mention Dharma recovery, which is a Buddhist approach to recovery. So there's many avenues to recovery. There's also spontaneous recovery. There are people actually that go, oh shit, I should stop doing this and do that. And really, if that's their path, go for it. Some people use therapy, church, and the gym. Some people use, and honestly, actually, Al-Anon is a good one. Al-Anon and Ar-Anon, because really, other people are my issue now. You know what I mean? So, you know, and my relationships with other people. So the point is that, and I've attended at some point, or tried to attend a lot of these meetings. I really have, because I want to experience what other people find helpful in those groups. And speaking of recovery, medication is another part of people's recovery. We have a chronic progressive illness, and that is backed by science. If you take any other illness, if the course of treatment doesn't work for that person, do they just tell the person to like, just suck it up and do their treatments right? No, they say, let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try this. Sometimes we get so attached to what worked for us that we invest in other people's recovery like that.
So, Josh, do you have anything to add or comment on what Joy had?
Sometimes you learn in life that it's really good to just sit and listen. So just everything that you were saying, there was a lot of things that I can relate to, but one of the biggest things is your aura, right? Like, I'm a huge aura person, and it's just been amazing to be at the table with you this morning, because a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, and that's what the great thing about recovery is a lot of the stuff that we talk about, you don't get to a place where just because you work in the field or you have a certain amount of time that this stuff doesn't apply to your day-to-day life, right? So no matter how long or how good you've been doing, there's always a time for us as the person in recovery that we have to come back, and that's what I loved about how you said when you constantly keep going over the steps, because it's not, you don't get to a point where it's just all figured out. It's a constant battle, it's constant work that we put in for the rest of our lives. So there was just so much that that I found super interesting, and it's one of the latest things though. At the very end, there was going to these different type of meetings. Like as soon as you said that, that's something that now I'm going to challenge myself to do, because there's no bigger way to get that sort of information than to actually, than to experience it, right? One of the biggest reasons that got me into the field is because I had a lot of life experience on how to be a heroin addict.
Right.
I had a lot of life experience on how to ruin things and mess some stuff up. But now trying to be where I am today, I'm trying to gain the other side of the coin and that information. So that way I am better suited to help somebody when they come to me, reach out to me. So right now, when I get phone calls, text messages, I find them the information, but I want to get better at readily having it the way that you do. So you were also very motivational to me this morning to try to up the level of knowledge and intelligence that goes into recovery, because it's not just about telling our viewers don't use anymore. It comes to a question, well, I've tried this, Josh, well, what about the fact that that didn't work for me? I don't want to be like, you want to be able to be the person, well, Dharma, Al-Anon, like you want to be able to have them options, because unfortunately this isn't something this is very time sensitive. So you don't want to have somebody holding on, by a string and then you lose them.
Right. So that takes us back to the beginning before the show, and I was telling you about the person that reached out to me, that all she was made available to was the Zoom meetings for 12-step. And you had talked about that there's a website that you could go to that does all different kind of Zoom meetings online for different recoveries. And what website was that again? I know you sent it to me.
It's
but it's Recovery Unity or something?
unityrecovery.org, I think it is.
Unityrecovery.org.
Let me make sure. Hold on. Digital recovery meetings, Unity Recovery, and their meetings are actually called All Recovery. So this way nobody feels like they have to use a certain substance. It could be behaviors you're recovering from. There's also OA. There could be behaviors you're recovering from, but it's meant to be kind of a safe space, and it's not 12-step based. And again, because sometimes people are like, why are you so anti-12-step? I am not. I'm all about the end. So 12-step and Dharma and TSF and SMART and therapy and the gym.
You know what I find?
And meditation.
I find when you were talking earlier, you were talking about in the beginning how you just showed up, even though you didn't want to show up. And us in the field, we call that the ambivalent state, right?
Yes, ambivalence, yes.
So like having that 1 foot in and 1 foot out. But in the beginning, when we're first going through our process, we feel like we're cheating ourselves. So then we don't even want to go.
Right.
And then we're okay with the answer in our head saying, then don't go, you'll be all right.
Right.
So there's so many of our viewers that are in that stage of ambivalence, and they're okay with saying, you know what, I'll just go tomorrow. But then tomorrow comes and you guys don't go. You have to take that first step and don't put yourself in that state where you have that 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Just show up, like Miss Joyce said.
Exactly. It's okay to just show up. If you're struggling in a moment, you're struggling in a moment. That's not, nobody deserves to be treated like they don't deserve recovery. Everybody deserves recovery, no matter what phase. Which, speaking of, I wanted to mention a book that I wanted to mention the other piece because I did speak to it. How much time do we have?
We got time.
Do we? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because I'm like, the one thing that over the past, I want to say 10 years or so, maybe even a little longer, I really started paying attention to the value of harm reduction and how it supports recovery. And I used to think, why in the world, for instance, would you give somebody who's actively using a clean needle? Well, because if that person dies of hepatitis or endocarditis or any of that, they don't get well. And if I think that they don't deserve to stay healthy while they're not being healthy, like the concept of bottom is a funny thing to me. Well, you know, just let them slide along the bottom. Unfortunately, sometimes bottom is death.
Mm-hmm.
So harm reduction to me is the ability for people to have the choice on whether they're in recovery or not, because we need to give them that choice. They have that choice. And we need to honor that choice, but we can give them opportunities to stay healthy and well so that they don't die. Did we lose it?
I don't know, I think he's gonna check real quick. We just want to make sure that we're still on. Okay,
Oh,
alright, no, it's just my bad.
oh, it's just this tablet.
We're back.
So harm reduction is about meeting people where they are. It's about, for instance, did you know the state of Pennsylvania, Lee and I were just talking about this, just passed a law. Well, first of all, so it was illegal to have fentanyl test strips. So we know that fentanyl test strips are killing people. And in Pennsylvania, up until last month, it was illegal to have a fentanyl test strip. Harm reduction is about give people fentanyl test strips. Would you want your loved one to be safe, as safe as they could be while they use substances? I'll give you another example of harm reduction that exists, that's acceptable in alcoholism, that share a ride thing where you call somebody to pick you up. That's harm reduction. Saying to somebody, I'll pick you up if you're too drunk to drive home, is harm reduction. Seatbelts are harm reduction. It helps us not kill ourselves when we drive too fast. I don't know who does that. No.
And then another thing that you were talking about earlier, that meeting where they're at, that's so important to me. I always talk about that. I always talk about the harm reduction, Josh and I. And just agreeing with the person when they say, this is where I'm at, and this is all I can do today.
Mm-hmm.
And just be okay with them and help guide them get through that day, because it gives them the opportunity to wake up tomorrow to possibly
Absolutely.
make that change tomorrow.
Absolutely. Actually, that was in one of my notes. I had to write notes. My notes are all over the place. So SAMHSA, what is that? What are the acronyms for that?
I forget.
It's
Something
really
else.
substance use and mental health.
Correct.
It's a big name, but it's the authority, at least in the United States, on substance use and mental health disorders. Their definition of recovery is as follows: a process of change through which an individual improves their health, wellness, lives a self-directed life, and strives to reach their full potential. That's the definition of recovery that is in my heart. That's what I believe is recovery. Now, how that person gets there, there's a million ways. It doesn't, your story doesn't have to be my story. It shouldn't be my story. My story's really weird too, but that's it. But your story and how I did it and how I got there doesn't have to be your story. And so it's important to remember that that we should honor people. So I wanted to also give a quick shout out to this book. It's called Coming to Harm Reduction, Kicking and Screaming, Looking for Harm Reduction in the 12-Step World. This was written by a woman who also grew up and got sober in the 12-step programs and struggled with the concepts of harm reduction. And this book chronicles how she and other people came to the awareness of how harm reduction can be valuable in saving people's lives. Her name is Dee Stout, S-T-O-U-T, and this book was on Amazon. It was actually really cheap and reasonable. You know, it was a great bargain, not very much, and they have it on Amazon. And I suggest that if you're interested in kind of opening your mind about that, or if you're somebody in recovery that who struggles with the concepts, this is a really good way, just like in the big book or the any book or any other book, stories of people and how they change their thinking about that is sometimes the best path to reflecting on your own thoughts around that. It's other people's stories that somehow make us connect. I want to say two more things, and first one is, recovery is easier for me. Like, it was hard in the beginning, and if I thought to myself that it was always going to stay hard, it's not hard anymore. And it's not hard because I did the hard work in the beginning, and I maintain the work, so I'm not accumulating. Like, I'm not dragging all this shit. You know, when I first got sober, I dragged all this stuff in with me, and so now, because I'm in recovery, I don't have to accumulate stuff. And not that I don't have sometimes some things that I need to learn again and stop in my tracks, but it's not hard. It gets better. I promise you it gets better. Well, you get better. Then it gets better. And the other piece is that no matter where you're at today, you deserve recovery. You deserve recovery. You deserve to be happy and healthy. You deserve to be free from the bondage of substance use disorder and the struggles. But if you're not there, we love you. Mm-hmm. We love you. You deserve love. You deserve health. You deserve happiness. So I think that.
Yeah, I just want to touch. Thank you so much, Joy. I really appreciate you, and I love the energy that you do bring. I had you as a speaker here for the Recovery Speaker Series. I think I'm going to ask you to come back soon because it's been a while.
And I think I was your number one person, wasn't I?
I think you were the first one, yeah, I believe so. But I do want to talk on two things that you were talking about earlier, was about the people not coming into the rooms with no hope and feeling no self-worth. And that always takes me back to the beginning of my recovery when I had to make decisions like that we use in early recovery on why not to change our lives. And that's because of our spouses, our children, our job. We find those excuses that we can't go get sober now because I have this job. I can't go to treatment now because then I'm gonna leave my wife home alone and she doesn't have no help to take care of the kids. Oh my God, how's this gonna happen? And you know, I listen to a lot of spiritual videos and inspirational videos. And in my early recovery, I was really big into T.D. Jakes. And he's one of my favorite, him and Steve Harvey and Denzel Washington, are very great motivational speakers. But I don't remember which one of those three were the ones that said this. And when you were talking about this earlier, I thought of it and I had to write it down. And it said that when you lose people in your life, it's that they're just not ready or on the same page that you are to elevate to the next level, right? And that's always stuck with me. And that's so true because we're gonna lose people when we come into recovery. We lose a lot of people. I mean, I lost a 20-year marriage. I lost the children that I was with, but they were already lost to me because I was in my full addiction. So I was not giving them life. I was robbing them from their life. So in order for me to be where I'm at today, that had to leave in order for me to continue to progress. And that gives me goosebumps because that's where it took me there. You know, when you say bottoms this, we have so many bottoms in our lives because we're human beings, and the tolerance level that we have as a human being is beyond this world because we can take pain. We can take a lot of pain, and we put ourselves in situations where it's painful all the time until we decide to change. It's like a rocket being shot up into space and the boosters fall off. That's how people have to fall off out of your life for you to be able to elevate. So, you know, I was told in early recovery by a huge mentor of mine, which you just recently met, he said, Lee, I don't care what you shoot for, but just shoot. If you want to shoot high, shoot for the moon, because if you miss, you're going to sit upon the stars. And I've stuck with that forever, man. That stayed in my mind. And when you were just talking about that, that reminded me of that so much. So thank you for your words today. Go ahead, Josh, what you got? Sorry, I just got emotional.
I love it. I love it.
These are the good ones. These are the ones that I enjoy a lot. The ones that it's just raw emotion. You know what I mean? It's just coming from the chest. Those are the because recovery still. Sometimes I've been reminding myself more, not that I've forgotten, but I've been reminding myself more and being really transparent with a lot of people recently about the fact that I'm still in early recovery. I'm not able to say the things that you two are as far as I am a person in long-term recovery. That's not my story, and I don't want it to be my story. The reason why I am on my mission is to help people like me, people who are where I was just at, you know, just mere months ago. I celebrated 450 days clean yesterday. And it's amazing to just see in those 450 days what I have been able to accomplish with, you know, losing losing those negative things and gaining the positive things, rebuilding my life and reorganizing it. And I don't want to say I lost much. I replaced things that hurt me with things that help me get better. I replaced people that hurt me with people that help me get better. And that's why I am in this constant place of reevaluating myself, because I get to a spot where I refuse to get to a spot where I've tried to be in recovery a few times in my life. Relapse is a big part of my story. And the thing that is different now today is when I start to feel comfortable, when I start to feel like I have it all figured out, I stop myself right where I am and I start to reevaluate everything that goes into this, right? Because just because I have it all figured out to where now my life consists of recovery. So I'm not at the bars, I'm not on the corners, I'm not making those phone calls. Other things could lead me to relapse because it has happened before. That other thing has been just feeling too confident. I remind myself, and that's why I talk to everybody that I talk to that hasn't made that step yet. I am living this to show you that it's possible. Like for my community, the individuals on my Facebook page, I get it. I know what's going on. I still see a lot of people that I still have loved and care for struggling. They haven't yet made that phone call. They haven't yet took that step forward. But I want to show you that this is it. It's worth it. I want to show you that it's not easy, but I want to show you that it's worth it. I want to show you that, you know, back when I was known as Camacho, never would I thought that I'd be sitting at the table with individuals like this to my left, every single Sunday for the last 10 in a row, right? I've had lunch with doctors. I've had, you know, business relationships and have done things for the community. I volunteered my time for big people in our community. And those are things that Macho wouldn't have done, because Macho would have never thought he was able to do that. I didn't think I was worth sitting with these people. I didn't feel like I deserved to keep going. I was a product of my environment. I was going to die a junkie gangbanger because that's what I was told by individuals who didn't love me, by individuals who didn't care, maybe now I think of them as individuals who are too scared to get the help and make the steps that I took. You know, they would rather keep me with them because I was, you know, comforting to be around, I like to think.
Big baby.
But these episodes are ones that I love the most because there's so much to learn. If you pay attention, whether you are in long-term recovery, you may be learning about harm reduction because that's relatively new. It's not new, but it's very much so becoming more of a new popular conversation, right? This isn't a conversation that is taking place everywhere, but unbelievable people like Joy, Lee, and as I get more educated myself, we're making it a public conversation because it could possibly save lives. I know I'm tired of losing, you know, people that I love to, you know, dirty needles, hepatitis, overdoses, things like that. But I got all over the place as well, but I just want to keep my message short and sweet at the end to the addict who is still sick and suffering. Please understand that you're worth it. Please understand that it's possible, that you are better than what you're living right now, and you do deserve to sit next to people like I am now blessed enough to sit next to. And if you're ready for that, the phone number, here it comes, 484-926-8358, Joshua Camacho, Macho Camacho on Facebook, transformationsjosh.23@gmail.com if you're into the email thing.
I just want to tell you, thank you for those words. You know, as I listened to you start talking, and you said you're just new into recovery and you only have this much time. You're you know, when I asked you to be the co-host to this podcast, there was a reasoning behind my question because of your time. The population we're trying to touch is the population that is just trying to get the recovery. So you are, it's an honor to have you sitting here because you're helping that population get the help that they so rightfully need, right? So don't take away from yourself.
Yeah, there's no only.
Yeah, there's no only, my brother. You're doing great work currently. Just continue to do it, stay focused, and like I was just talking about the stars, you'll be sitting up there amongst them. All right, brother? So again, I want to thank, so I told you he's a big baby.
I love it.
So I just want to tell you all again, thank you for supporting Transformations live podcast. Today we have a recovery football party here at the Berks Rise Center. Lots of food, lots of raffles. We're gonna have, what are we gonna have? Food, raffles, cake, all that good stuff. Come down, there's gonna be a lot of people in recovery here. It's from 3 to 7 p.m. at the Berks Rise Center, 702 North 8th Street. Come in through the Nichols Street side and just come on in. My phone number is 484-772-7079. My email is transformationslc14@gmail.com or hit me up on Messenger and I'll get back to you guys.